I am Lisa Herring, Superintendent for the Atlanta Public School System. As a leader, I'm very reflective on what it takes to give the community that you serve an opportunity to know who you are and to know in education, and because this is public education and we serve children, I'm always hopeful that they can seek to know more about two parts of me, my head and my heart. I wouldn't work on behalf of children if my head and my heart weren't critical leaders in doing this work. My head because I have to be strategic in thought around decision making, and my heart because I believe you have to have a care for children and their well-being in order to lead them and to select leaders to do the same. The other thing that I want to anchor though also is, as a superintendent, there's also an opportunity to vision cast. So we've spent the last several months defining the vision of this administration, which is grounded in what we call our APS 5. And a part of that is a focus in whole child wellness and also technology, innovation, classrooms of the future, personalized learning. We are uniquely poised in the city of Atlanta to explore all of that. And so whereas there's a vision, you also want those that you serve to have a sense of who you are to help execute that vision for children. It's my hope that that level of understanding and connection will continue to happen. And I understand that that's a day-by-day basis, but the proof is actually in the work, and that too is a day-to-day commitment. So I left Atlanta twice. I started at Spelman College in 1990, graduated in 1994, left Atlanta for a teaching opportunity and then graduate school, so it's 1994. I am a Georgia girl. I'm on 75, 85, 20, 285 every chance I get, even if I'm headed 75 south to Macon to see family. I left Atlanta again in, I believe it was 2006, after having worked in Atlanta at DeKalb County Schools and taking a job in my hometown of Macon. I don't feel disconnected from our city. I feel, which is the question that you asked, grateful to have been selected to serve in Atlanta as the superintendent. I don't feel that this position and this opportunity has brought me to an unfamiliar city. It's brought me to a place that I call home. That's important because that's deeply rooted in my commitment to get this work right for our children that we serve. But gratefulness is without question what I wake up with every day, even on the days when I'm most tired. I'm still grateful to be tired here, fatigued, not exhausted, because the work is work, but I'm grateful to wake up to rejuvenate to do the work here. So my first year as superintendent for Atlanta Public Schools has perhaps been unprecedented for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, I am grateful to serve the city and the families and students of Atlanta as superintendent. But when I say unprecedented, quite honestly, I'm referring to the fact that that transition occurred during a global pandemic. I've been fortunate that I've had the opportunity to serve as superintendent before this position, but having served as superintendent or not does not compare to leadership transition and critical decision making in public education during a season like we've had over the last 18 months. Well, I think one of the things that's critically important for a superintendent is to be able to have access and connection with the community. To be able to be visibly seen in schools, in different places throughout all of our community and society. And we started this administration behind a computer screen. On one hand, we've talked about how we were able to engage with thousands and thousands of individuals who might not have shown up publicly or physically, if you will, but there's still something important around the ability to interface and connect, for people to really know who you are, have a sense of your presence and feel you. We've worked very intentionally to move beyond the computer screen, but the truth of the matter is, beginning May of 2020 till even now, it's been a critical venue for us to stay engaged. That's the difference. Past experience, I'm everywhere. I'm in a school building, in a classroom, in a faith-based community space, in a nonprofit, in City Hall, etc. Those interactions haven't been what I've been used to in this role in public education. It's a difference maker. To be able to have overcome that, or still trying to, is an intentional focus. And I think that people in our community are getting to know me better. One of the reasons, though, why that's so important is that as a school system and as a district leader, you want to ensure public trust and faith as we make decisions about our young people and our families and education. And that was a barrier, but it's a barrier that I've worked very hard to try to overcome, and I own that that's still work that I have to do. I've been in public education for 20 plus years. There are those who've been in it longer than I have and those who are beginning. A good portion of my time in public education has been grounded, not just in academics, but in an area that is known as student support services. So your question is about what I like to call disrupted learning, unfinished learning, right? It was mission critical that as a school system we took ownership of a couple of things. First and foremost, what did the data tell us, for me as a new leader upon arrival, about what performance and emotional well-being looked like even before a pandemic hit? Of course, we were all brought to pause March 2020 up until now, and so I believe that it was important for us to have in place the opportunity to screen and assess for academic proficiency, as well as mental, emotional, and behavioral wellness. So what we've done in Atlanta Public Schools to address that is, in some instances, familiar as a best practice. We've put in place what we call universal screeners to first of all assess where every student is, kindergarten through 12th grade, academically, with reading and mathematics. Every student. That's important. And if I can be candid, it's in some ways monumental. We didn't have a universal screener in APS upon the arrival of me along with the administration. Secondly, we've done that under the umbrella of mental health and also behavioral health through another universal screener that allows for us to assess emotional and behavioral and mental wellness. That's referred to as BASC, BASC3 under Pearson. Our universal screener for academics we refer to as MAP. That's important. They're separate. We've spent the last several weeks educating the community on what it is. Those are some of the critical things we started for this academic year. But I also want to own, we launched last spring what we call Summer Academic Recovery. I started in the spring of 2020. By the time the summer transitioned and we weren't able to have a normal summer school engagement, when the fall hit, we started doing targeted assessment from August to December to figure out where our students were who had the most intensive needs. And we did start serving them before we opened the school building up. That's important to note because that was an effort. But in the fall, we were also planning for this past winter as well as the summer, so we launched what we called Summer Academic Recovery Academy. So this June of 2020, we brought 11,000 scholars back into APS coming out of this pandemic to also target and support their academic needs. So that was a 4-week window in June. And those same students entered into this school year with additional areas of focus around intervention and support, even put it into our schedule with flexibility for our elementary learners as a part of the continuation of support. And the last thing I emphasize, Madeline, is we've also owned the continuation of supporting what we call social emotional wellness. That has been from the very beginning. When we did our identification for our most vulnerable population of students last fall, while everyone was still operating with virtual learning, we called that targeted intervention. We looked at attendance. We looked at those students who, even virtually, were not connected. We looked at performance. We identified our students with disabilities. We received recommendations from teachers, parents, and even students around mental health, wellness, because it's important to note that during that window, everyone was still experiencing different forms of trauma just by being at home every day. That targeted focus allowed for us to provide tiered interventions of support to each of the families or the students specifically by safely bringing them back into the building in small numbers. And there was a lot of careful guidance to be able to do that. You also referenced socioeconomics, whether that's poverty or racial demographics as it relates to targeted intervention and support groups. And so certainly those are factors that are critically important, but We looked at more specifically the academic performance, the mental health needs, the behavioral needs, and those who had already been identified as students who needed additional supports for day-to-day support or day-to-day intervention. The truth of the matter is the decision around surveillance testing, vaccination, etc. rests at the seat of the superintendent with the support of the school board, but certainly the decision falls on the superintendent. Back in January of 2020, when we made the decision to open back up and receive all of our students for face-to-face learning, those who elected to participate, one of the practices that was presented to us as a best practice relative to mitigation strategies was the opportunity to do surveillance testing. So we started voluntary surveillance testing around February of 2020 for all of those who were coming back into the building. It's important to note that a little under 40% of our families then elected to even come back. So 60% were virtual throughout the year. We did surveillance testing for staff and students voluntarily throughout the summer program, but then this fall made the recent decision around mandating surveillance testing, the nostril swab, for all employees. We're about two and a half weeks into that process. We believed it was a best practice. We have found it to be. We have yet to have closed down a school completely to pivot to complete virtual learning. We have had classrooms, but not as many as we thought, because in our mandatory surveillance testing, employees must test twice a week. Actually, I did mine right before I came here today. It's still voluntary for families. That was an APS decision. If I could position, I think it's one of our best decisions we've made to date. Now, the other position you brought up was around vaccination. So just some data behind that. In Atlanta Public Schools, we have about 6,000 employees. We surveyed our employee workforce a few weeks ago, and of our 6,000 employees, 5,044 completed the survey. Of the 5,044, 81% identified that they were already vaccinated. That's an important vaccination data point. We have about 50,000 students in APS. Of the 50,000 students, 20,000 fall into that category of 12 and under. They don't have vaccination options. We can't, or we've elected to not, because that's much more complex legally to mandate it for children. But we've looked at the fact that the vast majority of our workforce is vaccinated. We have not removed ourselves from the decision-making process around whether or not to mandate vaccines within APS, but I've been really candid about the fact that we are exploring it. I took a moment, though, to unpack those numbers, because for the ages of 12 and up, or 13 and up, for those who are eligible to be vaccinated, we're still at only about 20% of our families electing to get our children and our young folks vaccinated, and we've made that available. There's a dual dynamic in that reality, and that's the greater population. We want to help influence that group to be vaccinated, and we still are considering the possibilities for mandatory vaccination in APS, but we have not landed on that just yet.